It's been just over 2 years since Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula. The region's oldest inhabitants, the Crimean Tatars, were almost universally against it, having suffered mass deportations before at the hands of the Russians. Now the new authorities have banned the Tatar assembly, calling it an extremist organization, a move one Tatar leader has likened to a declaration of war. The newsmaker İlhami reports.
There is division between supporters of Ukraine and supporters of Russia? Of course, as everywhere, all over Ukraine, and even more in Crimea. Crimea is a multinational region, and you can divide it endlessly. There are Karaites, Jews, Russians, Ukrainians, Tatars, Armenians. There are lots of different populations here.
Indeed, there are. But human rights campaigners say one group in particular is being trampled on. Ethnic Tatars. Now, Crimea's Supreme Court has banned their governing body, ruling it to be an extremist organization. Amnesty International says the move demolishes one of the few remaining rights of a minority that Russia must protect instead of persecute. This is a long-held complaint of the Tatars directed at Russia and the pro-Russian elements in Crimea.
An understanding from the Russian side is very important to us. We want for them to understand our love for our land and consider the fact that we do not have another homeland. We don't have another choice. They do.
The people of Ukraine rose up in February 2014 and overthrew the pro-Russian government of Viktor Yanukovych. It sparked unrest in some territories, including Crimea. Yanukovych asked Russia to intervene. It did, and sent in troops who took control of the peninsula. Just 2 weeks later, the territory voted to join Russia as an autonomous state, in a referendum that Ukraine and Western countries deem illegal.
I'm here to give my vote for the referendum to be with Russia.
The Tatars boycotted the vote.
Why are they deciding for all the Crimean people, for all the nationalities living here? Where is Crimea meant to be? Part of the Russian Federation or Ukraine? Ukraine and Crimea is as one, united.
Those who did vote chose autonomy. The Tatars are a Turkic minority. They account for about 12% of the Crimean population. It wasn't always the case. Crimean Tatars used to be the majority, but in 1944, the USSR under Joseph Stalin ordered the removal of all ethnic Tatars from Crimea. They were able to return after the collapse of the USSR in 1991, but by then, the majority of Crimea's population was ethnic Russian. Tatars have long complained pro-Russian elements are pushing them out again. They say it's not just a struggle for a region, but for the identity of the Crimean Peninsula. İlhami, the newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss whether Crimean Tatars are under threats is Emine Jepar. She's a Crimean Tatar herself and the first Deputy Minister for Ukraine's information policy. She joins me from Kiev. Thank you very much for joining us, Emine. Russia has banned the Meclis. They deem them, quote, extremist. They blame the Meclis for blockade and acts of sabotage. Is there any semblance of truth to the Russian claim?
As a Crimean Tatar, as a social activist at my background, as a politician today, I know that it is really far from truth, all those allegations that they put on Meclis saying that it's an extremist organization are really far from being truth. Because by banning Meclis, they do ban Crimean Tatars as a nation, as an indigenous people. So they are not allowing Crimean Tatars to exercise their rights according to that UN Declaration for Indigenous Peoples, let's say. And I think that a Meclis as a representative body is a little bit more than just an institution for Crimean Tatars. So by banning it, they put a ban on even on a kitchen level by saying to everyone who lives in Crimea today that Crimean Tatars are social outcast in Crimea.
Yes, just looking at the Russian claim a little bit more closely, they claim, Meclis leaders Refat Chubarov, Lenur Islamov and Mustafa Jamilev used the Ukrainian Ultra-Nationalist Association right sector to organize the food and energy blockade of Crimea. They also said that they blew up several pylons of the power mains that supplied electricity to the peninsula. Are all of those made up by the Russians?
The thing is that those explosions that Russian side claims to be done by Crimean Tatars activists is not proved yet. So we cannot say for sure who did that. In terms of this blockade, as Crimean Tatars leaders said several times, and it was really public information, that this blockade was done in order to to bring Crimea back in information agenda, not only in Ukraine but also outside of Ukraine. This was a step which was done in order to stop business between Crimea and all other parts.
When I spoke to President Poroshenko a couple months ago, he was quite ambitious. He said he wanted to take back all of Crimea before the end of the year. He also has a whole host of priorities on his agenda, right? He wants to end the war for good in the east. He wants to fix the economy. He wants to root out corruption within the Ukrainian government. As a Ukrainian government official, so putting aside the fact that you are a Crimean Tatar yourself, putting that aside for the moment, as a Ukrainian government official, where does the plight of the Crimean Tatar people really rank in terms of priorities? It's not very high up, is it?
I wouldn't say so, because as far as I can see that Ukraine does its best. Let's say there is a history when Crimean Tatars started to come back from the places of deportation 25 years ago. We have never had this kind of warm attitude towards Crimean Tatars. So officially, Crimean Tatars were ousted out, and officially lots of politicians here in Kiev thought that Crimean Tatars are potential separatists and are dreaming of, let's say, reintegration in Ottoman Empire, which is Turkey today. And this attitude has really been changed since the annexation. If you ask me whether it's possible to bring back Crimea in 1 year, the response is that we never expected that the annexation is going to take place. And I saw that piece of your interview with President Poroshenko. He said if anyone asked him in 2013 whether it was possible that Putin is going to destroy all those arrangements of post-Yalta period, no one could even expect that this could happen. So I think that's an issue that the world still doesn't have formed out or built up a vision of how to manage Crimean issue, of how to manage the war on the east of Ukraine, because everything was done on purpose, because Russia makes and provides smart politics. They annexed Crimea, then they started the war on the east. When you have a war, Crimea is not interested anymore. When you have refugees from Syria floating Europe, Crimea is not interested. It's not a secret, because Europe is much more interested in its own agenda: refugees, Syrian war, economic crisis, or any other issues. So this is all done on purpose, and Russia knows that. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, led and captained by Lavrov, they are really walking out and they are playing with that card.
Amina Jepar, unfortunately we have run out of time. Great pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us.